blessed love and peace. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahu Akbar. Dao ke dao, fe cheng dao, min ke min fe cheng min. Ja Rastafari. Deus noster qui es in cele sanctificetur nomen tuum. Vaheguru Sana. Baruch ata Elohim Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lachem min haaretz. Amen. Kyrie eleison, sevamas tu savrikatehi, sabe sata bavantu sukitatam. Fagabiem. Aquaba upendo na amanim. Fikiri nesalami, chintadam per me, libav me, womanjaka. Ubuntu shubanda fakitka. Shishe, como senira, domo arigato, pilama yelo wakatoko, toko doko shengun, gomanagan. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Ata jamya yata afaname. Bado, aho, nom shanti shanti shanti. Amen. Peace and blessings. We, inshallah, Bezrat Hashem, God willing, by the grace of the Most High, we going lightweight double up on something that we recently communicate. Mukbang style today, this evening. It is the evening following Shabbat. Again, that window in the week of wake, waka waka. All right. I must have energy. It's after midnight. I must have energy. I didn't just a minute ago. How about that? Uh-oh, that's danger right there. Where we get this energy from? Horde baka. That's not the healthiest. It's not the healthiest of ciphers in this realm of creation. So, double up on something we lightweight. Lightweight double up on something we previously shared. We're talking about religiosity. We did some call outs before. With humble, genuineness and compassion, respect. Even it may seem not, it is with considerable respect. And mutuality, we in this together. So all that being said, here's what we got to lightweight double up on. Side note, some strong reasonings today with kinfolk. So we give all thanks and praise to the Most High for that. So we got a lightweight double up on is this. To all religions, particularly the clergy, religious leaders, to all religions, you do not have the luxury or the credibility not to work with each other. Full stop, point blank, 100% facts. You do not have the luxury or the credibility not to work with each other. In each religiosity of the world, there is a proclamation of truth. We are honest people. We are fair people. We are loving people. There's truth with each of those claims. Yet, for each of those claims to be true, it must be comprehensive, categorical, absolute, universal, effectively. That's a big statement. That's a big step. It's not even necessarily what we're saying at this moment, because what we're saying at this moment is even further dire. This is what we're saying. Okay, you're fair, you're honest, you're compassionate, you're just, you're wise, and further. Okay. But you don't mess with kinfolk of that kind because, they pretend to be this and they say they're that and they betray in this and da 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 da. And history shows da 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 da. So therefore, we don't mess with anybody from that side. Because even those that seem like they're honest and fair and compassionate, we know better. Okay. But at the same time, you pay taxes to imperialism that transfers it into weapons of atrocities. You are doing that, religions of the world. Whilst you refuse to cooperate with each other, you all pay taxes, supposedly, allegedly. You are citizens, and you participate in the volitional, proactive political processes that commit atrocities around the world and within one's own nation. Regardless of who you vote for, whatever the party is, Labour, Whig, whatever the parties are, Tory, whatever, you are contributing to the atrocities directly or volitionally. But you refuse to work with each other. That's where your credibility gets shot. You refuse to work with people for thousands of years who live and proclaim the same tenets of peace and sharing and chastity and honesty and sobriety. Refuse to work with kinfolk like that. But at the same time, proactively pay taxes, proactively participate in democratic processes, proactively go to work 5 days a week, 6 days a week, some kinfolk 7 days a week. Go to work for corporations that are doing atrocities, that don't believe in nothing too tough, but doing atrocities and the pleasures that can be experienced in that process. And devote majorities of your days in that labor. And that's not shade on corporations or whatever else, but that's facts. So You proactively work in corporations and companies. Your adherents, your congregants, are employed in companies, corporations, and otherwise that are directly committing atrocities to other human beings, other life on this earth, animals, nature. But you refuse to work with each other. Credibility is shot. And you don't have the luxury because they say, Lauryn Hill said, the forces of Shaitan don't play. That this is like, it's like the question for each day, but particularly of this day. The slaves of Shaitan exist within each of your collectives, the religions of the world. And the slaves of Shaitan are significantly, increasingly organized. And stronger than any one religion at this moment. Ooh, that we can reason about that, and we don't want that. We don't wish that. We're working to alleviate that. However, what we observe in terms of conditions on this earth, in these worlds of creation, the organization amongst the saints is wanting. And the organization amongst the religions and that's why we say you don't have the luxury not to work with each other. So it's a matter of finding the ones you trust the most, the ones that you can like mess with the most. We say that in the street vernacular with benevolence, proper. But identifying those lineages, schools, whatever it is, but find the ways to work with each other in a legitimate way, not the standard for the past 100 years of the interfaith movement, not that dialogue and just nothingness. A dialogue is very necessary 100 years ago. Today, it's the bad kind of emptiness. Or it's the convoluted, how about that? The convoluted type of emptiness. Cooperation is necessary beyond just campaigns, a campaign for this year, the year of this, or short term, everybody figures out their own take on that project and then cooperate for 6 months or whatever else. No, that's not it. That's not cutting it. They don't have that luxury at this moment. Systemic, continual, ongoing, sustainable, regenerative cooperation, natural, organic, genuine, sublime cooperation. And you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to take me at my word. Take yourself at your own word, or what you know is true. And let that guide you. And on those occasions when that's insufficient, listen to your children. There is not the luxury and there is not the credibility not to cooperate. In terms of solution, one thing we share in a very basic, simple way is this. Where do you feel most comfortable and most secure planting fruit trees? And in answering that question, recognizing that the further implications of that answer, of that location, is an experience of home, residence, dwelling, domicile, family, and village. Because wherever you plant fruit trees, you have to share one way or the other and find a methodology of sharing with your own family, clan, but also the village around you, the community around you. So where do you feel the most secure and comfortable planting the fruit trees and sharing the fruit of those fruit trees for years to come, for generations to come, God willing? And when identifying such a location and recognizing the implications of family and village in that location, recognizing your purpose in life, your principles in life, and how to live, and how that is optimized within your village experience. The solution at this moment in world civilization is making space available for people to be themselves naturally, healthfully, organically, and independently. Whatever people's proclivities are in terms of politics, religiosity, ethnicity, culture, language, whatever, making space for people to be people's selves. Healthfully, honestly. Including religious communities. White nationalists, black nationalists, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Taoist, ultra conservative, ultra liberal, whatever people's proclivities are in this life, politics and otherwise, making spaces available for people to be themselves. Basic phenomena. When one is, I can put this in like a personal context, but this is a general consideration. All right. I make recent reference in a number of communications about me saying hi to people when I'm walking around wherever I'm at. And it's wherever I'm at. Even in another country, I do that. When I was in Denmark, I do that. But particularly in the village where I stay, I do that. And I'm known for doing that. And for better or for worse, and all things in praise of the Most High. I do it for over 20 years. Painfully, but also rather consistently. All things in praise of the Most High. So now I'm recognized for doing that. People recognize me for doing that, for better and for worse. And it's also a culture. It becomes a culture because relationship is cultivated. Even I may not know kinfolk's names. Kinfolk might not know my name. But at the same time, there's a communication and there's a relationship, and there's a lot that's communicated, even in just recognizing each other. So that's part of that. I made reference to that recently. Now, the point here is that I reckon, it's been a long toil. It's been a struggle, um, particularly in early years, given like where that practice comes from. In addition, it comes from pain and suffering. Um, and when doing it, and particularly in initial years, and people wouldn't respond, wouldn't even look at me or acknowledge me. Still don't. Some people, many, not many, but well, a fair amount do. Well, a fair amount. Um, some people don't even acknowledge, um, and look the other way or whatever else. And at this point, it's like that's where people are. That's fine. Don't. There's no expectation, no obligation for kinfolk to respond. And there's even when kinfolk don't respond, kinfolk are responding. There's everything's a communication, and there's a lot that is revealed when people don't say anything. And that's not a dig on people. It's like showing what the kind of the pain that kinfolk are experiencing. So it's not a matter of being angry, but it's a matter of like recognizing, yo, kinfolk is suffering right now. Okay, just respect that and share what we can. That's what we do. Just share light. Reading an ayat from the Quran earlier today. Is it from? Hud, I think it is, but it's talking about the servants of Allah proceeding, and with the right hand, the light coming from one's hands, and that being part of the experience of the culmination, the experience of garden. So, and that resonates um, in reading that earlier today in the studies. So, but point here is that actually I've yet to get to the point. Actually, I was saying that there's no obligation. People don't have an obligation to say anything. Particularly women don't have an obligation to saying anything back or even acknowledge me or whatever else. That being said, I share light as I can, best I can in doing that. So that's what it is, and that's my purpose at that moment, to recognize people's existence, to communicate being a safety as best I can. And I have to be very careful about that, because even when somebody generally doesn't have bad intentions towards others, um, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person's not dangerous. Because if somebody starts to have a trust in somebody and starts to like confide, like yo, I'm being trafficked right now, and somebody is not ready to respond to that, yo, that sense of safety and invitation of like, look, I'm a nice person, trust in me, and the person came in and like is like fleeing at that moment, trusting that person, and that person's not ready to respond and provide the proficient need that person has at the moment, yo, that's almost false advertising. So we have to be very mindful of this, and very just being very mindful of that. That doesn't mean not say hi to people or not say, but just understand like what's involved, and how even when we're not intending malevolence, doesn't mean that we're not actually having a negative effect on people. So all that being said, by and large, there's a lot of positivity, a lot of positive energy, a lot of support, a lot of encouragement, a lot of kids. I know for myself for a fact, I've gone out and not want to talk to anybody for certain reasons, certain moment in like the past decade. Um, and like even struggling, like I don't, it's been a while since I've had this, but like struggling, I don't want to feel like talking to people. And like immediately, like the first person I see, they say hi to me first because they know me for doing that. And right there, light right there, like affirmation, whatever I was going through in my own mental tunnel, being by myself, whatever, and we just get into this like zone. Once we get out, we know it's predators. We know it's predators lurking, and just like so, when somebody just hi, it's like all the difference in that day. It's all the difference in the world. So I know how that I am when I receive that. And so that's what I try to do when I share it, at the very least, particularly for the kinfolk who are quiet. And even kinfolk who don't say anything, look away because they can't handle it right now. But even like just feeling like a hand wave or whatever else, that being some assurance. So anyways, all that being said, this is the point I'm getting to. And it's a little bit of a challenging thing, but it's going back to something I was sharing before. And this is like an ancient thing. This is like an old school, thousands of years type of thing. Like back in the day, in the days of villages and tents and like strangers and wanderers coming from a distant land. When somebody from a village, when a villager welcomes a stranger, and the stranger doesn't say anything in return, in response, that's danger. And when we go back to our ancient selves, our ancestors, and in that experience of being in a village, and we know everybody in the village, we know everybody's names, we know everybody's families, we know everybody's histories and everything else like that. Now here we see somebody who's different, wearing different clothing, has a different facial features, skin color, hair, experience, clothing. I mean, different. Don't know who this kinfolk is. So we say hi, and the kinfolk doesn't respond back. Ooh, what's going on here? Now we're gonna have to like, yo, let's gather together because we don't know who this person is and what they're about. That's natural. That's just natural. Um, that's very logical. It's very natural. Now, fast forward a few centuries, a few thousand years, or whatever, till today, and the city life experience, it's the everyday thing for people not to talk with each other. To see a stranger and not say anything, the stranger not say anything, even when saying something to the stranger not saying anything back. Is it still danger? Yes. Is it the same kind of danger? Maybe not. Maybe so. It may be considered as a curated danger, um, an acclimated danger, wherein people are accustomed to living amongst strangers, living amongst people who are different religions and politics and ethnicities and everything else, and like having to like coexist in the same kind of space, but at the same time, yo, not messing with each other too tough. So therefore, not talking to each other. So it's a regularity for strangers or for residents, even of the same village, not to talk, but particularly someone you haven't seen for a while. Now, in that scenario, when it is somebody who lives in the same village and knows you recognize the person, whatever, and still doesn't talk, whoa, danger again. So it is. That's facts. It's logical. Now it's a very regularized danger, um, but it's still something that is unsettling. It is a stress amidst all the everything else happening, and so it's beneficial to recognize that. What do we do about that? Again, like I said, share, be proactive as much as possible, particularly for men, less so for women, but particularly for men, being proactive with the positivity in a genuine way, not doing numbers and this and the other, but being genuine, and being patient, uh, and cultivating culture. Like I said, I do this for over 20 years, and still like yo, to our estimation, the world has yet to be saved. However, um, so we temper like that advertisement of effectiveness. However, there is a difference that is made, and there is a stability um, in the relationship that is cultivated. There is a certain amount of trust. All things are praised in the Most High, and further. So, um, point though is that like to remember what it is when people don't speak to each other. Like remember what that actually means. And even though in today's version of civilization and the city experience, it's a common experience. It's a normalized, I should say, a normalized experience. Still understand what is being communicated, what is being experienced, and otherwise. Now, is that much we want to say on that? Um, I'm just gonna say for just like with the fruit trees and think about like where you feel safe and comfortable planting fruit trees. Again, in a very primordial kind of ancient experience, remember what it's like and what it means when greeting a stranger and the stranger doesn't say anything. So, that being communicated, should be mindful because it is getting on 1 a.m. and the fatigue is just starting to creep in at the moment. There's something else with this though. Here's the thing. Okay, so I mentioned it being danger. I say that in a comparatively ambiguous way because the danger can be a number of different things, and we don't want to be too presumptuous. We don't want to be too limiting. We don't want to be too inaccurate in articulate. So we just say danger, just for me, matter of being mindful about that. It doesn't mean call up the posse or whatever else like that, but just understand that is danger. When somebody does not say something, does not recognize somebody else's existence, that is a danger. There's a huge spectrum of danger, from very mild to like huge, eminent atrocities. But recognizing that a person not saying anything to another person, that is a form of danger. So, not trying to be alarmist, not trying to rabble. One of those things. I'm not trying to like rabble rouser. Is that what we're talking about? I'm not trying to rabble rouse people into being vigilante. Oh, you didn't say hi to me. That's a danger right there. Militance and overreactiveness and everything else, intolerance, hostility. That's danger. But just be mindful of that. Particularly, I mean, if kinfolk are those kinfolk who are not saying anything, to recognize that what kinfolk are being when not responding in that way. And this is not a solicitation for saying hi to people or saying hi to me when seeing me or whatever, but it's just a matter of recognizing that primordial experience when being in a village and seeing a stranger, acknowledging, saying, greeting the stranger, and additionally, and the stranger not saying anything. Just remember what would you think in that circumstance at that point, and recognize how that exists today, and what it means in that interaction being normalized in recent generations. So one other thing with that is that a person, and here's like the twistedness, or the like, just like this is the actuality of today. Seeing somebody who's a stranger and they don't say anything back, saying there's danger, and in actuality, it may not necessarily be. Well, how do I put this? That person might actually be an ally, and that's how things are at this moment, given the conditions, particularly in the city, of people surveilling this, that, and the other, and keeping an eye on this, that, and the other, and people living amongst each other of different persuasions, so that when somebody walks by, they might know exactly who you are, and everything else like that, but they can't say anything, can't acknowledge it, because acknowledging it is going to divulge a certain amount of information to other people who are watching. So, but they know they have a sworn vow to be in allegiance with what you are doing, but they can't make it public, known, and otherwise. So just because somebody doesn't say anything, and particularly because a person doesn't say anything, yes, it's danger. Categorically, whatever the thing is, there's a danger within it. However, in actuality, it may be further amount of allyship, quote unquote. We have to be mindful of allyship amongst the imperialism, but it may be that that person is actually significantly committed to cooperating, but just can't communicate it in a public way for whatever reason. So again, be mindful, because that's how the game is. That's how the game is. That's how the game is, particularly at this moment. That's much of what we have to share. Is that the positive thing we send off on? We got rice cooking. We have greens. That's medicine right there, right there. And put greens and rice together. Ooh wee. We have some peanut butter and sriracha. What you talking about now? That's earlier today. Eating on the ground, even guerrilla style. Think about eating on the ground though, as I kind of fumble through it. Got to be mindful of, like, not necessarily hygiene per se, but just like cleanliness, because It's one thing to sit on the ground, and there's all different types of stuff on the ground on the city sidewalks. You already know that. People spitting, doing all different types of stuff on the ground because that's how people treat people's habitat. That's just what it is. So even just sitting on the ground, particularly without a cushion or without some kind of like blanket or anything else like that, taking things into people's hands. And it's not just spit; it's all different types of pollution. Whether it's when it gets winter, whether it's the salt, which is nasty to the skin. That salt be tearing the skin up if you ever experience it. If you just think about like I don't know if it was always this way with rock salt, but if you just think about how rock salt like heats up when it's liquidated, when it's introduced to liquid like snow, how it like literally burns, and how it does that to snow, but at the same time it does it to tissue, human tissue as well, when exposed for a duration. Like if a sock has been soaked up with some, wow, what am I talking about now? Talking about pollution. See, it's getting late. Blame it on the hour. Yeah, yeah. Whatever you do. Yeah. Anyway, I was trying to think of a joke about Milli Vanilli and not writing their own songs and blaming it on something, but then not being the authors of that. So anyway, there was a joke there. We're just gonna leave it in the air at the moment. Um, doom, doom, doom. That was uh, Universal Traveler Endeavor, um, which is a song composed by a band called Air. I know so many places in the world. I do. It's been a long time since I heard the song, but the most recent one is Alone in Kyoto, which has no lyrics, just deep dot, deep dot. All right, enough of a sidetrack, whatever. Pollution we're talking about, sidewalks. Um, there's all different types of pollution. So it's one thing just to be sitting down on the ground. Be mindful where you put your hands, palms of the hand particularly. I tend to go on my knuckles. My knuckles aren't as dry as I was anticipating. I was expecting ashy knuckles to illustrate my point, but when going down, placing hands on the ground, now people are going to be mindful, give me the bump because anyways, placing on the hand, we do a lot of things with the inside and the interior of the hand, so be mindful of the non-pollutedness of the interior of the hand. So I brace myself with my knuckles when I go down, um, and sit on the ground, and then be mindful where we place our hands, what we place. And here's the thing, particularly when eating, it's one thing just to sit there and talk or whatever else, but when eating, now we're talking about ingesting things and like again chemicals, aside from just whatever people are spitting and hawking up and spitting and dogs urinating and all these other type of things. Aside from all that, most of that is organic. Some of it might have some kind of like bacteria or virus or whatever, so be mindful of that, but most of it is comparatively benign. Particularly it evaporates, and so it's just the substance that's left, and that's less communicative. You get what I'm saying? Contagious. um so it's nasty to think about being in that kind of thing, but in terms of like actual threat to health and well-being, it's comparatively mundane, comparatively mild. What is of further consideration in particular locations, again, is the chemicals that people put on the sidewalk. The rock salt is one, fertilizers, pesticides, and additionally, um, I'm going to keep it at that. Petroleum is another thing. That's a runoff. Now, probably is less runoff on a sidewalk from street traffic. However, like those are things that are of increasing concern in terms of health and well-being, uh, particularly outside the scope of communicative phenomenon. So, I was sitting outside earlier today. I had some food. Now, again, it's one thing to sit down. It's one thing to have food, and then it's another thing to have food that requires like preparation and everything else like that. So, and that's what I did. And didn't like rehearse the protocols of like everything. So I started to do like, let's say, cross contamination. Like, oh wait a minute, I was on the floor and I just put it on my lap, and now my lap has whatever was on the bottom of the floor, and then I just put my hand on my lap, and then bonk off. Anyway, so just being mindful of that. So I guess what I'm saying is not necessarily don't try it at home, but if you do try it, like encouraging kinfolk to be mindful. Um, Trying to think if there's anything else to share at this moment. It feels like there's the obligatory 20 minutes to make it an hour type of thing now at this moment. We are at 1 o'clock in the a.m. It is beneficial to wake up and do prayer and meditation before the day, next day, God willing. Still have rice cooking. Um, we've shared basically what we had to share about religions. Don't mean to sound flippant or whatever, and continuing on talking about other things that are perhaps um, less solemn. Uh, Still searching for a wife. Aha. Um, Also being mindful of, well, I'm not. I don't think I'm gonna get into much of like um, politics or economics or whatever about what we're having. The focus is still on completing the calendar for this year. Already second, we're in the third month now of this year, and we have yet to complete the proper rendering of the calendar. So it's been a challenge, but there's a considerable amount of adjustments and adaptations for this year. Same basic gist of it, but there are a considerable amount of adaptations, and that's one of the reasons for the prolonging of completion. Um, Study cycle has already begun for this year, so that's challenging. We're into the fourth week now with the study schedule, the weekly study schedule. Um, so that's one of the things that's in the works. The World Matriarch, the World Matriarch Study Program. We continue in cultivating that. We have the working outline at the moment. The next step is completing the workbook for it. Um, and I guess I can divulge one thing. We're also being mindful of how much we share in the digital sphere, and how much we prepare and share within the analog or the organic, the natural sphere. Is that the binary, digital and natural? Uh, so, in terms of the workbook, the outline is basically digitized, so it's already available in those channels. The workbook, though, with the detailed materials, and additionally, what we're preparing is to include already prepared materials, lists and charts and images and stuff like that that we've already completed, and anything that involves like new content, new writings, and additionally, to do that in the natural sphere, undigitized. Um, Now, how do we reproduce that? It may be a matter of doing it in handwriting so that when it is digitized or amidst it being digitized, at the very least, it's still an image, a scan, or something like that of an organic or a natural expression rather than just a digital text document of that that's easily replicatable, manipulatable, and otherwise. So, a scan of a handwritten document has further, um, presumably, has further integrity integrity. So that's what we're considering. We're preparing for the World Matriarch Study Program. Other than that, we're working on our basics of our daily, weekly routine, our yearly routine, seasons, and preparing materials and the support for these practices, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and further. So, one of the things we are considering at this moment along those lines is convening a weekly orientation program. This is somewhat of I'm a little bit letting this out of the bag before doing it directly with kinfolk. So I'm gonna have to shut up before I say too much. Yeah. So what I will say is an orientation, a weekly orientation joint to invite people to talk to. And the thing is, we've always hesitated in being proactive in inviting people to study whatever, even to this day, through all everything, because we want to be very clear of not proselytizing and not trying to convert people and not trying to like be slick about it, whatever else, of saying one thing and then doing two things. So it's been difficult to kind of like find the balance in that in terms of sharing world civilization knowledge, literacy about world civilization, world livity, but at the same time not trying to convert or not trying to seem like we're converting people to our specific spirituality, mysticism, or religiosity, whatever else. So we've been trying to like find that balance because some people are interested. Some people are interested in either one and not necessarily concerned about any kind of like proselytizing or non-proselytizing or whatever else. And some people are very uncomfortable with one thing and very comfortable with another otherwise. So what we're looking at this moment, what is shared with us, is a methodology for doing it. So that for those who have the interest of just learning about world civilization, we can do that. And for those who are interested in having those spiritual conversations, we're doing that. And what we're looking at is having an orientation spiel of about half an hour. Now, one spiel is for those who have an interest in earthly learning or earthly studies, studies of the earthly. That's world civilization, history, geography, da 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 da. But basically, world civilization. So that's one. We have an orientation spiel for that, and that includes rivers, language, and calendars. One of the ways we describe that, articulate that is, do I say I'll hold off on that? Well, no, I gotta share. I gotta share what I can. So I'll share it at this moment. So one of the ways to do it is for encourage kinfolk to be to remember one's own indigenousness, to learn one's ancestry, and to share in the seasons, the natural seasons around oneself. Remembering indigenousness, learning ancestry, sharing seasons. Those are the three things we invite kinfolk of any background or whatever else in terms of learning about the world. Remembering indigenousness, learning ancestors, sharing seasons. And that just so happens to coincide with remembering indigenousness, rivers, the rivers we come from, the rivers where we are, the migration from one to where we are at the moment. Remembering our indigenousness, rivers. Learning our ancestry, language, the languages our ancestors speak, songs and stories our ancestors share, language, sharing seasons, calendars, the calendars of our ancestors, the calendars where we are, the relationship with the cycles, the yearly cycles. So that's the foundation we've been sharing for the basic while. And then from there, song stories, rituals, and ethics of the world. That's basically our format for the earthly studies. So that's a world, a half-hour spiel about the basics that each week, or maybe each week, we're still working on this. And the nature of the spiel that we have worked out is such that it's something that's the portion, it's the part of it that's repeated each week is something that's affirmational, that it could be done just to do. It's not a matter of learning something new per se. So that's the predominant substance of the orientation spiel for the earthly. And then in addition to that, include some of the basics, and then also like a Q&A afterwards, so people could just follow up. When people have gone to the previous joint or whatever, people can just say, oh, well, I had a further question about this, and we just chop it up, question and answer afterwards. So like a 30-minute spiel and then question answer on a weekly basis, making it available so that just rather than trying to answer everything or trying to like kind of like present everything on at one moment on the street, whenever when I talk with people, be like, yo, flow through. This we're looking at Sundays, to be honest, Domingos, at about the time the sun sets, at the time of the day set. So just be like, yo, you can come through. Here we have a spiel, but it's for the earthly, and then question and answer. Have additional materials you can look at or whatever else. That's for the earthly. Now, for the kinfolk who have an interest in talking about the spiritual path, and additionally, working on the basics of like what to share in that kind of spiel, but something similar along the lines of a fixed kind of affirmational kind of repertoire, 15 minutes, maybe half an hour, and then from there, again, having additional materials specifically about the spiritual, talking about the different religiosities and what our studies are, and additionally, and inviting Q and answers. Q and answers. How about that? Q and A's from that on a weekly basis. And the thought is, the working thought is to schedule that first, maybe an hour or so before day set. So the spiritual kinfolk who have the interest in the spiritual conversation can come beforehand, and after having that, can stay for the earthly conversation. Already be there and be attuned to that or whatever else. If not, kinfolk can continue on, and then but then the kinfolk who have the interest in the earthly can arrive at that point and have that conversation, and then maybe be there, have that available for about an hour or so, and then after that, yeah, on a weekly, yeah, that's what we're looking at. After that, after already like maybe 2 hours potentially, um, that being a comparatively open-ended joint for an informal, ongoing matriarchs discussion and reasoning on just whatever topics are of concern. So it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit considerable amount, particularly um, in the summer months. If we're talking about sunset already, um, that's getting late into the day. But anyways, that's what we're looking at, and fitting that within what our schedule is at the moment. Um, so, speaking of schedule, we don't have to go to an hour. We don't have to go to an hour. I was going to do a Jermaine Jackson song, or I don't even know if it's a Jermaine Jackson song, but either way, still don't have to go to the full hour. Already past 1 a.m. There's only one candle left. There were 5 lit when I started doing uh, the work this evening, and now there's simply one. So it's almost like an Agatha Christie narrative, except it's all the same light. So, uh, anything else positive we have to share? To be honest, energy is way low, 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 low. Autumn is upon them. Autumn is upon them, up and at them, and there are still green leaves. There are a lot of bare trees, bare branches, a few bare branches. Still a number of trees that are that have leaves that are changing color. Wind is generally getting, or the air is getting generally cooler. We've had some warm days in the past week, but then some brief rains, and now um, the cool winds are becoming like getting settled into the environment. Um, Water is rushing comparatively moderately at the moment. Particularly, I'm talking about the waterfall, particularly um, amidst the recent rain a few days ago. Uh, Birds are about. The woodpecker arrives earlier today, so that's nice. Blue jays speak. That's nice. Chipmunks holla. That's nice. Flying squirrels are being further low key but still flowing through. That's nice. Sparrows are being sparrows. That's nice. See a singing dove a few days ago. That's nice. Um, Squirrels be squirrels. That's nice. Yo, I think I actually saw a possum like maybe about a week ago at this window. Uh, that's nice. How do I think it's a possum? First, it looked like a cat coming from the bin. Um, was it day? Was evening? It's difficult to even remember what day, time of day it was. I'm trying to remember the light. I seem to remember it being like somewhat of a silhouette or a shadow. Not a shadow, but like just like a dark silhouette. And when seeing it continuing to walk, it was as increasingly evident that it wasn't a cat. So then it becomes whether it's a raccoon or a possum. Uh, so it's comparatively inconclusive, but we're going to go with possum. Uh, could have been a raccoon though. What else we got? Oh, oh. I think that's going to do it. So, uh, again, we give all thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim. Blessed love and peace and Rastafari. One thing I have yet to say in terms of solution. And this is important. This is beneficial for me to share. Now, remember, sometimes these prolonged kind of like, why do I keep on going? Because there's something that I'm supposed to say. I have yet to say it, and I'm trying to remember what it is. So this goes all the way back when I'm talking about family, village, and solutions. Um, when I talk about planting the fruit trees, um, and um, the micro solutions in terms of finding purpose, finding principles, and then building community, building village around that purpose and principles with those who share in the same ones. I talk about the governments, the authoritarian constructs of the world needing to make space for people, for families, for villages to be people's and families and villages' respective selves, organically, naturally, genuinely. And by genuine, I mean based upon each one's own also respective proclivities of technology as well. So organically, naturally, as well as technologically. So along those lines of that solution, two things. One is for individual collectives, ethnic collectives, religious collectives, cultural collectives, but specific collectives taking the initiative to establish these villages. Um, Groups, I talked to kinfolk today of um, Black Greek um, experience and heritage. Where's the Black Greek villages? Where's the HBCU alumni villages? And otherwise, there's little excuse for there not to be that at this moment, and particularly because there's less and less luxury and credibility for not doing that. How about that? I said no credibility. We say no credibility and or luxury for religions not to cooperate with each other? How about very little luxury or credibility for any ethnic group, religious group, cultural group not to live with each other as a village? What? How can those two exist? What are you talking about? Of course they exist. They coexist. On one hand, I'm saying all the people have to work with each other, but at the second hand, I'm saying like have to live separately and segregationally. Yes. What else? I'm trying to stay away from being profane right now in terms of my language, but what if that does not make sense? To live in a village where you reside with other people who believe and practice the same things you do and who you trust the most for your own security, safety, education, and otherwise. Food, eating the same types of food and everything, cooperative economics, and additionally, of course. But then wait, hold up, but wait, why does everybody got to cooperate with each other? Can villages not cooperate with each other, even though the villages are very different from each other, micro villages? And it is a necessity because particularly for those who are technologically inclined, using technology, innovation, mathematics, wisdom, and knowledge from other cultures, there's the necessity of continually working with, negotiating with, reconciling with peoples of those other cultures, the children of those innovators and teachers. So, hold on a second. S'il vous plaît, s'il vous plaît, s'il vous plaît. Just because the basmati rice is burnt does not make it brown. And this basmati rice has been recently graduated to the category of burnage. Lightweight. How about let's look before we make proclamations. Oh, the sizzle. It's lightweight. So, talking about solutions, villages. That's what it is. In the modern age, the postmodern age, the post-democratic age. What else we call this? The age of the Black Buddha. What else we say? There's something else that was positive and affirmational. In today's age, there is necessity for people who utilize technology to work continually with people from other cultures, all the other cultures of the world, because that's what the technology is based on. The airline patterns are making statements based upon like how the airplanes fly. There is a definite statement being made on how the air traffic controllers bring airplanes into the city sky. Um, Not trying to read too much into it ever, but just be mindful that there are statements that are being made, and there are people's lives presumably being utilized in making those statements. But it becomes too obvious that statements are being made. All that being said, um, it's necessary to cooperate with people from other communities. That's just facts today. The only reason, or the only kind of collective with less of that type of necessity. It's not compassion. It's not charity. It's not politically correct. It's a necessity for every community to cooperate with every community, to find a way of cooperating with every community. The only ones who are outside of that are those that don't partake of what the other communities share, and that is indigenous people who are living in indigenous land, in indigenous ways, with indigenous language and such. Otherwise, anybody drawing from the imperial cipher got to find a way of genuinely getting along with all the other participants in the imperial cipher. Now, in doing that, doesn't mean you have to live in the same village. Doesn't mean you have to live in the same neighborhood with each other. Doesn't mean you have to go to the same school even. Doesn't mean you have to speak the same language. How about that? You can... It's not a matter of like imposing this cookie cutter factory experience of multiculturalism on everybody and everybody has to do that. No. It's not even a matter of let people be people. It's like people will be people. And if you're trying to be a boss or some kind of governing phenomena in that process, it behooves you to make space for people to be who people are, for one's own benefit. And one of the most proficient, and I'm getting to a point here again, I'm talking a lot to get to there. One of the most proficient ways is for people to live in a village according to their own purpose and principles that they share with others. Now, I was talking before, like I said earlier, about with kinfolk earlier today about specific groups, particularly Black Greeks, HBCU alumni, kinfolk, and additionally establishing villages along these lines. I think I've actually said that earlier today. Here we go, past an hour, official. Congratulations. But we're still getting to another point here. So that's where the solution is for each of these groups, and that's just HBCUs that I'm talking about in Black Greeks. But again, for Chinese kinfolk, for Little Italy kinfolk, for the Catholic Church kinfolk, like what's it called? Ave Maria in Florida. Is that the name of the university? And additionally, I don't want to epitomize that or whatever else, but like for the Muslim community, Jewish community significantly already does this, significantly, particularly within the Orthodox. So, but for each community, that the prominent bond or relationship that kinfolk experiences along these lines, whether it's religion or ethnicity or culture or otherwise, to live together and support each other, to be secure with each other, and in that security, being further productive and peaceful with others. Obviously it's not a guarantee. It's not the invincibility, whatever. But the logic just shares that when kinfolk feel further safe and secure, then kinfolk have less of a discouragement of getting at each other. Now there's always greed and that susceptibility of trying to take from other villages or whatever else, but that's another story. That's a further favorable problem to deal with than what the conditions are at this moment. So that's what we share as a solution for world civilization, is for the authoritarian constructs to make space for collectives to live and be collectives' own selves. Now, with those who have some knowledge about governments and law and this and the other, if there's an agreement and an acknowledgement of the logic and the value within what I just communicate in terms of that methodology, then the typical kind of response is, okay, well, how do we legislate that? How do we make it happen? We can give incentives, we can give tax breaks, we can give land grants, we can do all these different things to encourage collectives, and we can have requirements. Have to have like a constitution or some kind of charter or some kind of form of agreement that shows that this is an entity that has its mechanisms in place to solve resolution, solve disputes, and share authority, and additionally, and so have these as prerequisites. And when those prerequisites are satisfied, okay, here's an area of land for development, whether it's in the urban area in some place of blight, or whether it's a rural place or whatever else. And again, like the homesteading, the United States is established upon land grabs and free for alls. So to say like, wait, that's a freebies and everything else, the U.S. is rife with freebies, subsidizations for agriculturalists of destroying their own crops for the sake of not adversely affecting market prices, or having too much abundance and surplus. All different types of freebies that are going on. Tax breaks to corporations. We're talking about freebies. This is a necessity for the survival, for the continuation of civilization itself. People need to be people themselves. So those who the government is, well, all right. So for those who have knowledge about how government works, that's what it is. Like, okay, legislated incentives, fast track these scenarios. Here's the criteria. But there's ways of getting it done in a fast way. There's ways of getting it done in a medium length way. There are ways of getting it done in a long term way. There's ways of getting done in all three of those ways simultaneously. Challenge. The challenge with that is this: that all the entities, all the religious collectives, and additionally, well, I don't know, before we put it back on them, we'll say us, we'll say this. At this moment, just recognize governments aren't doing anything. The governments are paralyzed. The governments are are um, are stagnant, and it's designed to be stagnant, and it's very difficult for it not to be stagnant. And it's almost like even atrocities at this point, a warfare, isn't enough to motivate and mobilize the nation. COVID outbreak and disease isn't enough to proficiently mobilize government and activate government to be effective in terms of instituting long-term um, rejuvenating policies and practices, because there's been a degenerative phenomena within the construct of government, particularly when I'm talking about the United States government, particularly the behemoth United States government. And the way it works is that, I mean, all the politicians and everything else are just like sound bites to keep, let me not be too cynical, get to the point with this part of it. Basically, the way it works is that the official lawmakers and the legislatures get very little done, get extremely little done from session to session, from year to year, from term to term, from election to election. The so-called leaders, elected leaders, or whatever, get extremely little done. There's a lot of hype. There might be trying to push something through, bulldoze it through, or whatever else. Whatever that is very often not anywhere near the priority of what is needed in the constituency, the aggregate constituency. And it's just a way of rabble rousing people to get involved. The actuality is that each cult, each political cult, whether it's the religious communities, whether it's the ethnic communities, whatever else, each political cult vies to get a person in the game, in the system, in the government offices, whether it's an elected official in the legislature, whether it's an executive position at a specific department or division or whatever else. But people just work to get a person that's for them in a position to do things, and then get things done very under the radar, low key, um, and get it done that way. Not going through not going through the official processes of government, because nothing gets done that way. Essentially, the one thing that gets done maybe is the budget, um, and there's a lot of things that go into that. But um, other than that, the way things get done is under the radar, working directly with the institutions or whatever else, and that's through the people who have their own connects or whatever. So Point being that when it comes to ideas and solutions for society that are macro, and that are like comprehensive and additionally and that are even needed and like urgent, the mechanics of the government just don't work that way. Um, and even and I can't my expertise or my credibility or my authority in speaking about this is comparatively modest, but even in the situation with COVID a few years ago, this wasn't even like government acting. Government was just being the mouthpiece of science and doctors. And it's academia that's further authoritarian than the government is. So um, those are the conditions. So recognizing that when we talk about the solution of fruit trees and families and villages and such, and even when there's agreement and like there's like an interest of doing that, even upon on the part of the governments, even on the part of the religious and ethnic and cultural groups, we can't rely on government to do it because like government is like Pharaoh. Like even when government wants to do it, it it may start, but then it reverts to like, ah, oh, nah, never mind, blah 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 blah, and everybody gets into their divisiveness again of just trying to get what they can through their own channels within the government. So anything that like bipartisan or multi-partisan or whatever else, it's like it's not. Come on, let's be honest about it. It's not happening like that. Um, that's the very safe estimation. So what that means is that those entities that have the increased motivation for doing this, the religious communities, cultural communities, and ethnic communities, um, need to take initiative in doing it. Um, Organize and plan and get it done through each's own respective channels as it is. What is helpful, and that's it. That's what it is. So each group going to who they got in their crew, who's in the channels or whatever else, forming a plan, working out how to work with each other in one's own crew, how we're going to settle disputes, how we're going to share power, authority, decision making, how we're going to divvy up dividends and otherwise. Um, Work that together amongst one's own selves, the group's own self, and then okay, so who do we go to? Who's our person in this position, whatever, just to like get the approvals and additionally, whether that's the approval of land, whether that's like tax, whether that's land grant, whether that's status as official municipality or whatever else, whether that's codes, and all of that, like work through the person who is the contact person. So that takes the volition, that takes the initiative of groups themselves. Two things that are helpful in that process is one, when groups do establish these methodologies, these plans for the pretense or for those plans to have a replicable approach, a replicable methodology, meaning that other groups can do something similar to that group in other locations so that there is an increased number of collectives who are doing it, there's an increased normalization of doing it, and the beneficial effects of communities becoming communities' own selves is increasingly enhanced. It is multiplied. It is compounded. Um, it is magnified because it's not just one collective doing it on a collective zone and then being like an ideological oasis amidst continuing strife and everything in the aggregate of society. One community is doing it and shares, saying, we base this upon being an ethnic, or excuse me, we base this upon being an ethics based um, residential community, and based upon being these ethics and how it benefits the aggregate of our society, the government is able to acknowledge and support and cooperate with what we're doing, and whether it's fast tracking, whether it's tax breaks, whatever else. But because we're doing it in this way, not just because we're this particular religion or because of this particular ethnicity or whatever else, but we're doing it because of this ethical purpose, for this societal purpose and societal benefit. That is something that other communities can do similarly or the same, and have similar and the same kind of responsiveness from the government, because it becomes the de facto policy, um, without actually being the de, or how should I say, de jure? Yeah, is it de facto, de jure, potato, potato? It becomes the effective culture of society, if other than the actual law of society, without having to legislate it, saying we are going to grant these things based upon these principles, whatever. One group sets the precedent for it, and in setting that precedent, other groups do that, and the government already wants to do that, but it doesn't have to make a categorical decision or law or referendum or whatever else. It just goes through the same kind of approval process. And that might be a very simplistic and perceived as naive kind of rendering of how government works. But the point being here is that people, groups, collectives are required to establish the initiative for these solutions. And in establishing the solutions, work with the government in a comparatively as a comparative formality. And that might sound rather condescending or whatever, and conjure up all types of contrariness about the government, but that's the basic gist of it. Ha ha ha! I have to be mindful about the memory now. Okay. That's the basic gist of it. Collectives doing it collective selves, and when it comes time to like dealing with the government, um, working through established channels to satisfy the formality, um, and in enough kinfolk doing it, recognizing that it's not a matter of, oh, they got it, we got to get it. It's not dividing a finite pie. It's sharing and being very generous with each other and sharing how each collective does it, because the further number of collectives that are doing it, the further it's being done and the further benefits that are for everybody, the further the culture is enhanced, the aggregate culture of society is enhanced at the municipal, local, metropolitan level, but then also at the regional and national level. The further kinfolk are who are living in secure and comfortable villages and domiciles as families, the further stabilized society is. So when one community does it in a certain way and it gets it done effective, rather than just trying to keep it secret and, oh no, don't let anybody else know, show kinfolk how you got that, how you did it like that, and then encourage kinfolk to do it themselves, and that has a multiplying or a multiplier benefit at the local and the macro levels. So that's one thing. The groups have to take the initiative. Now, the further thing, and this is, I don't want to like be counterproductive in sharing this, but it may be that, particularly for some collectives, and amidst a certain amount of stagnancy, it may be a matter of collectives, that initiative that collectives are taking, actually like challenging established laws and ordinances and otherwise. And by that I mean like going to a abandoned lot or whatever else, and like transforming it without pre-approval or whatever else, based upon what kinfolk, if they don't have channels in the government to get those approvals and fast tracks or whatever else, but in the meantime, need places to stay, and otherwise, um, going through the process of of requisitioning land and facilities, particularly those that are abandoned, that are blight, that are not being utilized and otherwise. And the preeminent thing is having a purpose and having principles, having a discipline within each other, amongst each other, and a methodology of settling disputes and sharing authority and making decisions and sharing the material benefits that are gleaned from that cooperation. That's essential without even talking about the government. And then everything else is, again, the formality. So that is what we share a solution. And let me tell it, we work on it at this moment, and it ain't easy. And much of what we've invested in, particularly for myself personally, is the intellectual space, the cognitive space, the mental space, the imaginative space to remember, to receive, and to share these solutions, to think in a way that enables this type of solution. And in doing that, it involves being further distanced and vulnerable amidst conventional conditions. So that's one of the things that we deal with as an immediate collective. Other collectives have abstained from making those same type of investments of space, and so thus have further proximity and functionality within conventionality to do things that we prescribe, that we ourselves may have yet to do ourselves because of the further amount of distance. So there's the ancient wisdom that we ascribe to of being the example and teaching from that rather than just advising other people what they should do when oneself is not doing it per se the same exact way. That is true. That is wise. That being said, we can also look back to the teachers and the ancients and how there are advisors, people who become sages and not kings or princes or governors, and who advise and tell the governors and kings and princes about what the ancients do, and provide advice on how to govern the land and the people without actually being a governor oneself, because that is the role of the sage. So this is what we share as a sage collective, lightweight, so-called, kind of, sort of. So that's how we explain, or that's how we articulate or respond to those notions or those accusations of, well, you say all this, but you're not even doing it yourself. What you talking about? We've let go of a lot of the things, a lot of the trappings that make these solutions increasingly expedient. So we got further work to do, and it takes further amount of time. In the meanwhile, we share with kinfolk who do have further position to make it an actuality, in a comparatively expedient amount, an expedient duration, even before we establish the same things ourselves per se. So anyways, we're going to leave it at that. And again, half an hour later, with all thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, known by many different names and beyond all names. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari.